I will save you from dancing like I was when I was a sophomore or junior in high school when I first heard that song, made popular from the 1998 movie Night at the Roxbury. The song is What Is Love by Hideaway, if you want to look it up later. Now, I also saw that I was not the only one doing the little head bob thing, so I know that there were many of you in here who know what I'm talking about. But we have to stop and actually ask, what is love in today's context of the gospel? Because one thing I don't want us to do is to think that somehow prior to Jesus nobody loved one another. Right? That somehow like prior to Jesus, like parents didn't love their children, that there was no such thing as love in the world. That, it wasn't until Jesus that, love as we understand it somehow came to be. And there's a caveat there, because in some ways love was radically transformed through the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. It did change love fundamentally. But we have to get beyond our sort of understandings of love, right? It's more than just simply this recognition of this wonderful action and feeling in which we bring love to other people and this sort of familial love and all of the requirements that come with that. It really is incredibly linked with what we are kind of having towards the end of the book of Revelation, right? So we've been talking about this the last several weeks. Revelation is this removing of the veil, that sort of the cloth that prevents us from seeing fully what God intends for the world, and the radical transformation that happens through the sort of lens that the author is trying to invite us into, that love has been absolutely redeemed. And what we hear in today's small little pericope from Revelation is this beautiful couplet, because it begins and ends with the presence of God, but even that presence is subtly and beautifully transformed from God being this sort of omnipotent, wonderful creator to something intimate that will be with us always. God will be with us at all times, the book of Revelation says. This beautiful moment in which, that every tear, every personal heartache will be wiped away, because even though we have this amazing God who can do all kinds of amazing things, one of the subtle images that come from the book of Revelation is that the sea itself is sort of taken away. And there you kind of have to understand sort of first century, Palestine understanding of what the sea represented, right? For them, the sea represented chaos, right? This earliest voice. In fact, throughout the Old Testament, anytime that God sort of subdues water, or even, the moment when Jesus walks on water to subdue it, when he commands the sea to be quiet, it's a testament to the power and authority that God has over all of creation, and that it is God alone who can bring about order to the great chaos that is the sea. So this great, amazing creator God is personally invested in each of our tears. Think about that for a second. I mean, that's a kind of intimacy that I'm not sure I have with my own family members. I mean, I love them, don't get me wrong, and I would do just about anything for them, but occasionally, and I have a family member who in particular, will cry at the drop of a hat. Now, that's not a problem. I love it, right? Ignatius himself talked about the gift of tears, right? This gift of being moved emotionally. I think that's beautiful. But there are moments where I'm just like, you do you. You have your moment, right? I'm not that invested in every tear, right? I'm invested in my family member, but not every single tear, right? I'm human. I'm fallible. I don't have that kind of love that God is being shared with us in this reading from Revelation, that every moment that you weep, God is intimately invested in that tear and wants to know what is going on and wants to be present to that, right? So this is the radical transformative love that we're being invited into, right? So we need to continue to ask. So when Jesus is talking about this love, this is after Judas leaves. And it's an important moment, because we can say that Jesus isn't just trying to be nice, he's actually conscious of what love is going to cost him. Right? It isn't just him trying to say love one another and do good things and be nice to each other, but rather he is intimately connected to the reality that the love he has and the love that he's trying to demonstrate that comes from the Father through him to the world, and vice versa, from the world through him back to the Father, will be a costly love. He knows what it's going to cost. And so, we need to ask that question, what is love? And here's where I disagree with the song. I mean, okay, let's be honest. I only love that song in that movie because it was one of the first times I just remember laughing so hard that my sides were splitting and milk was pouring out of my nose because that's what I could drink at the time, right? I mean, that's what was happening. But it's objectively not a great song. I mean, and part of that is because if I put a caveat that you can never harm me as a requisite of my love, I've put a barrier. And frankly, it's an unrealistic barrier because even in the best of times, I know I've made mistakes. I've said something that has hurt someone else's feelings. I've confronted someone in a way that was unhelpful. I've sort of had an emotional meltdown and it wasn't in a place or a space that could be received in a healthy way. Like, all of those moments are human, and I know I'm not alone in having those moments. And so if I put this sort of caveat that I can never be hurt by my love, whether that's somebody loving me or me loving someone else, I think I put myself outside of the community. Now that's different than boundaries, right? That's different than being having a good, responsible set of boundaries and recognizing, that there are people in our lives that we love them best by loving them from afar, right? That's the healthy boundary. And that's not what I'm talking about here, right? I'm not talking about, going against that boundary. But what I am saying is that that might be a wound, that might be something that I have to recognize, that boundary in my life, but I don't set that up as the prerequisite to be in that relationship, right? Somehow we get to that point because that's what's healthy, but the prerequisite is to recognize that love is costly, especially this Christian love that we're being invited into. This is sort of godly love that we're being asked to participate in. At its heart, this love is a sacrificial love. And it finds its genesis in the familial sacrificial love that so many of us know so well, right? I mean, I know we know it so well because I have the pleasure of watching all of you love so well in our community. You love your sons and daughters, sometimes with a sacrificial love where you have to sort of stand at a distance and let them sort of grow up and do those things and be silly and all of those moments, right? There's a sacrificialness to that. Or the fact that you've sacrificed other dreams so that you could provide for them in a particular way. Maybe that was ensuring that they go to a Catholic school, or ensuring that they had this particular opportunity to, enhance their education. Whatever that happens to be, right? Like, I've witnessed you witnessing that sacrificial love, right? So that's a good love, but Christian love is radical in that it asks us to not do that for the people where it's easy. Right? It asks us to do it actually with those people where it's the most difficult sometimes. And this is what catches us, I think. Because if we only let love be sort of that beautiful familial love, it's sort of like saying, I love Minnesota when the sun is out. That's nice, but that's not all the time. Right? Today's an easy day to love Minnesota. The weather is perfect, the breeze is just right, that sun, But if you don't also somewhat love Minnesota, and even though it might be difficult when it's, 20 below and cold and you've got 3 feet of snow on the ground, it may not be your favorite time, but I think there's still something lovely there that we are called to love. And even more so when we are called to sort of engage in this dialogue of love. There are a lot of things going on in our culture at this time, and this homily isn't necessarily the space to attack each one of them. But I want to be clear that if we're going to be in this relationship, if we're truly to be welcoming, that means that we sometimes have to have difficult conversations, or we have to walk through difficult periods in our culture, and there cannot be a position of like, hey, I won and you lost. Or that cannot be a position in which this is the way it's supposed to be and every other idea is somehow wrong, but that we have to engage in this delicate process of conversation. In this delicate process of trying to talk about each other, especially when decisions are being made that will affect people, that will affect a lot of people. And on every level, the core teaching of life and the core teaching of reaching out towards people in love is something that I fundamentally believe. But I want us to be careful that we cannot lose our ability to be in a kind of relationship that invites difficult conversations. Ones that might not have the perfect answer. Ones that might not get us to where we want to go in a single sitting, but require us to kind of come back again and again like a family to sort of sit down and sort of continue to work at what it is that we're talking about. You know, there's this wonderful quote from Bishop Putner, often attributed to Oscar Romero, that we are prophets of a future not our own. Right? That we plant seeds of a tomorrow for trees and plants that we will not be able to see. We've cultivated from seeds that we didn't plant, and we continue in this sort of cyclical process. And so the invitation, I think, of this Christian love, this radical Christian love, is to actually hope to participate in a love where we don't get to see the end game of that. We participate in a love that will go beyond us, that will have a future that we simply cannot and will not control. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather go back to the dancing and sort of the head bobbing, because that's a lot easier, right? It's a lot easier to sort of simplify love and just make it about like really nice and warm, fuzzy feelings. But the Christian love that we're being invited to today is this radical invitation to our future that we cannot control. A life that is encompassing so many different realities. And so when we begin our liturgies, and I absolutely think we mean this with every fiber of our being, wherever you are on your faith journey, you indeed are welcome here. We don't mean to say that just because it sounds nice. It does, in fact, sound nice. But we mean it because I think if we are truly to engage and build a future that I can't control, I want to be doing that with as many people as possible. I want to have as many people participating in that journey so that we can truly enter into this process and we can sort of struggle through it together and wrestle through it together and just know that we may not have the quote-unquote right answer today, but that we strive and desire for that right answer tomorrow. And most importantly, we take solace in the gift that it is not our work alone, but a work that we participate in through Christ, who is the animator of all things, through a God who, as the book of Revelation says, is interested in every single one of our tears. Every single moment, every single sort of microscopic way in which we have a feeling, God wants to be present in that. And for me, that's almost too good to be true. That's almost too amazing to be able to imagine in any given moment. But we do that, I think, best. We begin to imagine it best when we look at one another and see truly the Christ that is present in each and every one of you. We do that best when we surrender my sense of wanting to be right for God's sense and God's desire to be in communion and in relationship with one another. Because it's only by practicing this here and now that I think we'll authentically be able to do that in the future that is yet to come.